The vast, shimmering expanse of the Xantari Empire's warship loomed above Earth. Its dark, metallic surface glinted in the starlight as it hovered silently, a symbol of power and destruction. Queen Zorkella, the formidable ruler of the Xantari, stood on the bridge, her piercing golden eyes scanning the human planet below. Known for her ruthless efficiency in battle, she had conquered countless worlds, crushing civilizations that dared oppose her. And yet there was one thing she had always dismissed as mere myth: the legendary human warriors. Her intelligence reports spoke of them, stories whispered among her commanders. But Zorkella scoffed. The humans were primitive, their military technology nothing compared to the might of her empire. The tales of human warriors sounded like nothing more than stories spun by frightened mouths. Legends, she muttered to herself, her cold voice laced with disdain. She had no time for such fantasies. But her pride would soon be tested. On the battlefield, as her forces descended upon the human stronghold, the Queen's attention was drawn to a single figure, Captain Aiden Cole. He was unlike any soldier she had ever seen. A tall, broad-shouldered human, his features were strong and determined, his eyes burning with the resolve of someone who had seen battle. Unlike other humans, who cowered before the Xantari army, Aiden stood tall, leading his troops with unwavering confidence. His armor, though far less advanced than the Xantaris, gleamed under the blinding sun. The humans had sent their best to fight, but Zorkella dismissed them as nothing more than pawns. The first clash was brutal. The Xantari forces, armed with advanced weaponry, charged forward with the ferocity of a storm. But Captain Cole, with his troops behind him, met them head-on. Zorkella's lips twisted into a smirk as she watched the battle unfold on her command screen. The human soldiers fought valiantly, but they were no match for her technology. She expected them to fall quickly, crushed beneath the weight of her superior firepower. But to her surprise, Captain Cole seemed to anticipate every move of the Xantari forces. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a strategist, his every move calculated and precise. With each strike, Aiden seemed to defy the odds. When a Xantari soldier lunged at him with a plasma blade, he sidestepped with swift agility, using the enemy's momentum to his advantage. In moments, the alien warrior lay defeated. Zorkella's smirk faded as she watched this human captain single-handedly turn the tide of the battle. Her curiosity grew. Was this truly the strength of human warriors? She had dismissed them for so long, but this one human, this Captain Cole, seemed to embody everything the legends had spoken of. She narrowed her eyes. Her interest piqued. Perhaps the time had come to see this legend for herself. The Queen's arrogance, once unshakable, now wavered as she realized the truth. Human warriors were far more than she had ever imagined. And Captain Aiden Cole was no mere soldier. He was a force to be reckoned with. Queen Zorkella stood at the front of her warship, her eyes fixed on the unfolding battle below. The clash between the Xantari forces and the humans raged on, but something was different now. The human resistance wasn't crumbling as she had anticipated. In fact, they were holding their ground. Among them, Captain Aiden Cole stood out. His movements were sharp and calculated, as if he knew exactly how to exploit the weaknesses of the Xantari soldiers. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a tactician, a leader. His soldiers followed his every command without question, their morale boosted by his unwavering confidence. Zorkella, once dismissive of human strength, now found herself watching intently. She had always believed that the stories of human warriors were exaggerated, that they were nothing more than fables told by frightened planets hoping to scare away the conquerors of the galaxy. But this was something different. Captain Cole wasn't like the other humans she had encountered. He wasn't afraid, he wasn't weak, and he didn't fall like the others. He fought with an intensity that made Zorkella question everything she thought she knew about humans. As the battle continued, Zorkella's mind raced. How was it possible for a single human to be this effective against an entire army of Xantari soldiers? Her forces were equipped with the latest in alien weaponry, technology that had flattened entire civilizations in mere hours. Yet here was this human, fighting with the ferocity of a beast, taking down Centauri warriors left and right. His soldiers, though fewer in number, were managing to hold their own, working with an efficiency Zorkilla hadn't expected. Each maneuver seemed deliberate, every strike calculated. It was as if Captain Cole was reading the battlefield like a book. Zorkilla's thoughts shifted to the battle plans her generals had drawn up. They had expected this to be a quick and easy conquest. The human military, she had been told, was no match for the Xantari Empire. But now, standing on the battlefield from the safety of her warship, she could see how wrong her generals were. The humans weren't surrendering. They weren't running. And Captain Cole, he wasn't simply a warrior. He was the heart of this resistance. His every move seemed to inspire those around him to fight harder, to push further. For the first time, doubt crept into Zorkilla's mind. She had never seen anything like it. Humans were supposed to be inferior, weak, predictable creatures. But Cole was proving that theory wrong. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting with purpose. He wasn't backing down, not even as the Xantari closed in on his position. Zorkilla clenched her fists, her grip tightening on the railing in front of her. She hadn't anticipated this. She hadn't prepared for this level of human resistance. A surge of irritation mixed with awe washed over Zorkilla. How could one human, one soldier, defy the odds so completely? She had underestimated him, and now she was faced with a choice. Would she continue to dismiss the humans as mere legends, or would she recognize the undeniable truth? That this human, Captain Aiden Cole, was a legend made real. As the battle raged on, Queen Zorkilla stood in silence, her eyes never leaving Captain Aiden Cole. His movements were effortless, almost graceful, as he cut through her soldiers with a precision that seemed almost unnatural. Each strike, each dodge, each command he gave to his troops was like a carefully choreographed dance. He was not just leading. He was inspiring his men to fight beyond their limits. Zorkilla's cold, calculating mind raced as she watched him. There was something about him, something that set him apart from the other humans she had encountered in her conquests. Zorkilla's pride, once unshakable, had been pierced. She had dismissed the stories of human warriors as nothing more than exaggerated fables. Yet here was this human, this Captain Cole, defying every expectation. It was time to face him, to see if the legends were truly real. Without hesitation, she gave the order. The ground trembled as her warship descended toward the battlefield. A hush fell over the Xantari forces as they saw their queen stepping onto the front lines. Zorkilla's gaze was fixed on Cole, her eyes burning with determination. She was the queen of the Xantari Empire, conqueror of worlds. No one, no human, should have been able to match her strength. And yet here he was, standing tall against her army. It was time to end this. As she approached him, the hum of her energy shield flickering around her, Zorkilla raised her hand, signaling her forces to hold back. She would face this human warrior alone. Captain Cole, seeing her approach, straightened. His face remained stoic, but there was an undeniable fire in his eyes. He knew what was coming. There would be no running, no surrender. It was time to prove that the stories, the legends, were true. Human. Zorkilla's voice echoed across the battlefield, rich with authority. I've seen your skills. You are nothing more than a legend to your people. But now, I will show you that the Xantari Empire is invincible. Prepare yourself. Aiden's expression was unreadable. He knew this moment would come. He had heard of the Queen's reputation, and he knew her power. But he wasn't about to back down. He stood his ground, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, ready for whatever was to come. There was no fear in his eyes, only the clarity of a man who had fought battles for his people his entire life. Zorkilla's lips curled into a smile, though it held no warmth, only the cold promise of a deadly challenge. I will destroy you, human. Your legends will mean nothing when I am done with you. With that, the ground between them seemed to crackle with tension. The air grew thick, and a charged silence took over. The duel was about to begin. There was no turning back now. Aiden knew the odds were stacked against him. But one thing was clear: he would not go down without a fight. This was his moment to prove that humans were more than just myths to be dismissed. The battlefield fell silent as Queen Zorkilla and Captain Aiden Cole faced each other. Their eyes locked in a battle of wills, each determined to prove their strength. Around them, the air hummed with tension. The Xantari forces stood at attention, watching with bated breath as the two combatants prepared to clash. The humans, though fewer in number, looked on in awe, their eyes wide with anticipation. No one had ever seen the Queen face a human warrior one-on-one before. This duel would be legendary, no matter the outcome. Zorkilla was a towering figure, her glowing armor shimmering with the energy of the stars. She moved with an otherworldly grace, her every step calculated and deliberate. Her energy blade crackled with deadly power, ready to strike. Aiden, on the other hand, stood firm, his body tense and focused. He wasn't as physically imposing as the Queen, but he exuded a quiet strength, one built on years of training and battle experience. His human armor, though simple compared to Zorkilla's advanced technology, was worn and tested, a symbol of his resilience. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his blade, ready to defend or strike as needed. Without warning, Zorkilla lunged forward, her energy blade slashing through the air with blinding speed. Aiden barely managed to parry the blow, the force of the strike sending a shockwave through his body. He gritted his teeth, feeling the heat from the blade as it passed inches from his face. He could feel the power in her strikes, and he knew that every moment counted. Zorkilla was fast, her movements almost a blur, but Aiden's reflexes were sharp, honed by years of combat. He knew that speed alone wouldn't win this battle. He would need to rely on his strategy, his ability to think several steps ahead. Zorkilla smirked, clearly enjoying the challenge. "Impressive human," she said, her voice a low growl. "But you're no match for me." She launched another series of attacks, each one more brutal than the last. Her strikes were powerful, aiming to overwhelm Aiden with sheer force. But the human warrior was ready. He moved with surprising agility, dodging and blocking, never giving her an opening. Aiden knew he couldn't keep up with her strength for long. He had to outsmart her. As she lunged again, he ducked low, using her momentum against her. He swept his leg out, tripping her, but she was quick to recover, spinning gracefully to her feet. The Queen was relentless, but Aiden wasn't backing down. The longer the duel went on, the more it became clear this wasn't just about strength. It was about survival, about proving that humanity had something more than technology and power. Zorkilla's eyes narrowed in frustration. This human warrior, despite being vastly outmatched in terms of raw strength and advanced weaponry, was holding his own. His tactics were clever, and he wasn't afraid to take risks. For the first time, Zorkilla began to feel something she rarely experienced: uncertainty. Could this human truly be as strong as the legend said? Could he defeat her? The duel was far from over, and with every move, the answer seemed to get more complicated. The battle between Queen Zorkilla and Captain Aiden Cole had reached a fever pitch. Each clash of their weapons sent shockwaves through the air, the sound echoing across the battlefield like thunder. Zorkilla was relentless, her energy blade flashing with every strike, while Aiden skillfully parried and dodged, his movements fluid and precise. Despite the difference in their physical strength, it was becoming clear that Aiden was not just a fighter. He was a strategist, using his agility and wit to outmaneuver the Queen at every turn. Zorkilla, usually so confident in her power, felt a growing sense of frustration. She had faced countless enemies in her time, but none had ever made her feel like this. Every time she thought she had him cornered, Aiden found a way to escape, to turn the tide of battle in his favor. It wasn't just his physical skill that impressed her. It was his spirit. He never hesitated, never faltered, even when the weight of the fight seemed unbearable. With each passing minute, Zorkilla realized that this human warrior was more than just a legend. He was a force of nature, a living testament to the strength of his people. For Aiden, the fight was more than just a duel. It was a test of everything he believed in. His people had fought and struggled for survival for centuries, and this moment was no different. Every strike he made, every move he took, was a reflection of that long-standing struggle. He had faced impossible odds before, and each time he had risen above them. But there was something different about this battle. The stakes were higher, the opponent far more dangerous, and yet, as he stood in front of Zorkilla, he felt no fear. His heart beat with a steady rhythm, his mind sharp and focused. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for all of humanity, for everything they had worked for. Zorkilla's attacks grew more intense as her frustration mounted. She had expected this human to break under the pressure, to show fear, to surrender in the face of a superior opponent. But Aiden refused to yield. Every time she struck, every time she thought she had him in her grasp, he found a way to rise again. His determination was unshakable, his resolve unbreakable. He wasn't fighting for glory or fame. He was fighting for the survival of his people. And in that moment, Zorkilla understood something she had never considered before. The strength of the human spirit was not something that could be measured by physical might or advanced technology. It was something deeper, something that came from within, a force that could not be defeated by mere weapons or power. Aiden was a reflection of that strength, and it was this strength that made him more than just a warrior. It made him a legend. As the duel continued, Zorkilla found herself beginning to admire this human. His spirit was unmatched, and it was clear that he would not give up until the battle was over. For the first time, she felt the weight of her arrogance. She had underestimated him, but now she saw that this human warrior was far more than just a myth. He was a living embodiment of the resilience and tenacity of humanity. And as the fight wore on, Zorkilla knew that she was no longer facing just a warrior. She was facing the very heart of humanity itself. The duel between Queen Zorkilla and Captain Aiden Cole had shifted into a new phase. The intensity of their fight had reached a boiling point, and the air between them was thick with tension. Zorkilla, though powerful and skilled, found herself in a battle that wasn't as easy as she had anticipated. Every time she thought she had the upper hand, Aiden would slip from her grasp, his movements sharp and unpredictable. Her frustration was building, but she couldn't deny the growing respect she felt for the human warrior before her. Aiden, though exhausted, was far from defeated. His breathing was steady, his grip on his weapon unwavering. He had pushed his body to its limits, but he knew he couldn't give up. He had been in tough spots before, but this moment was different. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity had something deeper than advanced technology and raw power. As each second passed, Aiden's confidence grew. He was starting to understand the pattern of Zorkilla's attacks, the subtle weaknesses in her fighting style. He couldn't match her strength, but he didn't need to. He had something more, human ingenuity. Zorkilla, sensing that she was being outsmarted, decided to unleash her full power. With a growl, she raised both hands, channeling the energy of the stars into her weapon. The blade glowed brighter than ever before, crackling with raw force. She slashed downwards, sending a shockwave that shook the ground beneath them. The Xantari soldiers watching from the sidelines held their breath, knowing that this could be the end of the battle. Aiden barely managed to block the blow, his arms trembling under the force of her strike. He felt the heat of the energy sear into his armor, but his resolve didn't waver. He would not fall, not here, not now. It was in that moment, when Zorkilla thought she had him cornered, that Aiden saw his opportunity. With a sudden burst of speed, he ducked low, evading another devastating strike from the queen. He used her momentum against her, spinning around her, and landing a hit to the side of her armored form. The blow wasn't enough to defeat her, but it was enough to get her attention. For the first time, Zorkella felt a crack in her confidence. The human had managed to hurt her. Aiden didn't stop there. He pressed forward, not with brute force, but with tactical precision. His every movement was calculated, designed to outmaneuver her. Zorkella's attacks became more frantic as she tried to adjust to his unpredictability. The human warrior was no longer just blocking or dodging. He was striking back, testing the limits of her armor, exploiting every vulnerability. In that instant, Zorkella realized something she had never considered before. Aiden was not just a human warrior. He was something more. His strength wasn't in his physical power or his technology. It was in his mind, his ability to adapt and think ahead. He wasn't fighting like any enemy she had faced before. He was fighting with the heart and soul of humanity, something she had underestimated. And in that realization, Zorkella found herself at a crossroads. Could this human truly be a match for her? Could this be the moment that would change everything she thought she knew about strength and power? The battle had taken a turn. Captain Aiden Cole had done the impossible. He had pushed Queen Zorkella, the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, to the brink of defeat. His body ached from the brutal blows he had taken, his breath coming in shallow gasps, but his resolve was stronger than ever. Zorkella, on the other hand, stood tall but visibly shaken. Her once unshakable confidence had started to crumble, replaced by a mixture of admiration and frustration. She had never expected a human to be able to hold their own against her, let alone challenge her authority in such a fierce and relentless manner. Zorkella's energy blade, once glowing with an almost blinding intensity, now flickered with fading power. The strain of the battle had begun to take its toll on her. She could feel the weight of her arrogance, the belief that no one could surpass the Xanteri, shifting. This human warrior, this Aiden Cole, had not only held his ground but had also forced her to question everything she had known about the limits of strength. With a deep breath, Zorkella lowered her weapon slightly, studying Aiden with a new respect. He was standing before her, his blade still raised, though his posture had softened just slightly. His gaze remained steady, unwavering, despite the exhaustion that clouded his eyes. It was then that she realized that this fight was no longer about power or victory. It was about something more profound. It was about something she had never truly understood about humans: their spirit. Aiden's resilience wasn't about sheer physical strength. It wasn't about having better weapons or more advanced technology. No, what made him different was his unyielding will to survive, his drive to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and his fierce loyalty to his people. It was a spirit Zorkella had never truly encountered before. Even when she had dealt the harshest blows, even when it seemed like the fight was over, Aiden had refused to give in. She had underestimated him. And now, for the first time in her life, she found herself in awe of a human. Zorkella took a step back, her eyes never leaving Aiden's. "You are not what I expected, human," she said, her voice soft but filled with admiration. "You fight with more than just your body. You fight with everything you are." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle between them. "I once believed that humans were weak, that you were nothing but stories told to frighten my people. But now I see the truth." Aiden, though exhausted, met her gaze steadily. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no triumph. Only the quiet recognition of the respect that had been earned, not through victory, but through spirit. "We fight because we have to," he replied, his voice firm but calm. "We fight because if we don't, we lose everything. You may have the power of an empire, but we have the power of survival." Zorkella's lips curled into a small smile, a rare sight for someone as formidable as her. "Perhaps there is more to your people than I believed. Perhaps you are worthy of more than just being legends." She stepped forward, extending a hand in an unexpected gesture of respect. Aiden hesitated for just a moment before reaching out, gripping her hand firmly. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. The battle was far from over, but it had changed both of them. Zorkilla had come to understand something she had never truly grasped before. The strength of humanity wasn't in their technology or might. It was in their unwavering spirit. And in that spirit, she knew there was something worth respecting. The moment between Queen Zorkilla and Captain Aiden Cole lingered in the air, thick with unspoken understanding. They stood there, hands still clasped, both feeling the shift in the very essence of their beings. What had begun as a bitter and violent confrontation had now transformed into something deeper, something neither of them had expected. A respect had been born in the heat of their battle, and with it, the possibility of something even greater, an alliance. Zorkilla took a step back, her sharp golden eyes never leaving Aiden's face. The human warrior was still catching his breath, but there was a calmness about him now, a quiet confidence. The fight hadn't broken him. It had only revealed more of his strength. She had seen him in the heat of battle, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. There was something in the way he fought that reminded her of the very thing she had lost long ago, something she hadn't seen in her own people for centuries. The idea of survival, not just for oneself, but for the greater good, was a concept that Xantari had forgotten in their endless quest for domination. Perhaps there is a different way, Zorkilla said, her voice steady, though the weight of her words carried the weight of a ruler who had never considered such a thing before. My empire has always sought power through conquest. I have never thought beyond that. She looked at Aiden, seeing him not as an enemy, but as a symbol of something larger. But your people, your spirit is different. It is stronger than I gave credit for. Aiden stood silent for a moment, letting her words settle. It was clear that the queen was conflicted, her empire's long-standing ideals clashing with the unexpected truth she had witnessed. He, too, had never expected to see this side of the Xantari queen, the leader of an empire known for its ruthlessness, now considering an alternative path. A path that involved humanity, a species she had once dismissed as mere legend. You've seen what we can do, Queen, Aiden replied, his voice calm but filled with conviction. We don't need to conquer or destroy to survive. Our strength isn't in what we take, it's in what we build. He paused, his eyes meeting hers, speaking not just as a soldier, but as a representative of his people. If we're going to survive this war, it can't just be about power. It has to be about cooperation, about understanding. Maybe it's time for both of our peoples to change. The words seemed to hang in the air, and for the first time, Zorkilla found herself listening to the human, truly listening. She thought of all the civilizations she had crushed, the countless lives lost in her quest for dominance. She had never considered that there might be a better way, a way that didn't rely on fear and strength, but on unity. Finally, after a long silence, Zorkilla spoke again, her voice softer, more reflective. Perhaps you are right, Captain Cole. Perhaps the time for conquest is over. Maybe it's time for something new. An alliance, not of power, but of purpose. Aiden nodded, a small smile crossing his face. An alliance, then, he said, one that could change everything. And with that, the seeds of a new future were planted. The war between humans and the Xantari Empire had not yet ended, but in that moment, something far more significant had begun. Two once opposing forces, bound by their own histories of conflict, now stood on the edge of something transformative. An alliance, forged in the heat of battle, was now a possibility, not just for survival, but for a future built on mutual respect and cooperation. The story of Captain Aiden Cole and Queen Zorkilla was far from over. It was only just beginning. The tension that had filled the air moments ago seemed to dissipate, leaving behind a strange sense of quiet optimism. The battlefield, once filled with the sound of clashing weapons and the cries of combatants, was now eerily still. Queen Zorkilla and Captain Aiden Cole stood side by side, their minds racing with the possibilities of what had just unfolded. An alliance, an understanding between the two of them, between the Xantari Empire and humanity. seemed almost impossible just days ago. Now it felt like the only path forward. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light across the war-torn field, Aiden looked at Zorkella, his thoughts weighing heavily on him. He had seen the horrors of war, the devastation it caused to both sides. He had fought for his people, and in doing so, had learned to survive, to adapt, and to protect what mattered most. But now, standing next to the queen of an empire that had once sought to destroy humanity, he wondered, could peace truly be achieved? Could they find common ground and build something stronger than their differences? Zorkella, too, was deep in thought. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, had softened. She had seen Aiden's strength, his resilience, his unyielding will, and it had shaken her. In all her years of conquering worlds, she had never encountered a force like the human spirit. Her empire, built on domination and fear, had always sought power. But Aiden had shown her that true strength didn't lie in taking, but in building. He had shown her a way forward, a way to evolve beyond the constant cycle of war. "I never imagined that it would come to this," Zorkella said, her voice quiet, yet resolute. "I thought that in order to be strong, we had to conquer everything in our path. But perhaps it's time for a change. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Aiden nodded. "Maybe we can. We've both lost so much in this war. Maybe it's time we stop fighting for more destruction and start fighting for something better. For survival, yes, but also for peace." Zorkella's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the stars were beginning to twinkle in the deepening night sky. "I cannot undo the past," she said softly. "The people I've conquered, the lives I've taken, they can never be returned. But perhaps I can change the future. Perhaps this is where it begins." Aiden understood. He, too, had seen enough destruction in his life. He had fought in wars that had torn entire worlds apart, seen the suffering of innocent lives, and wondered if humanity would ever truly know peace. But standing here, next to the Queen of the Xanteri, he felt a glimmer of hope. An unexpected alliance had begun, one that could change the course of their futures. It was not a promise of immediate peace, nor a guarantee of success, but it was a beginning. As the night settled around them, the stars above seemed to symbolize the vast possibilities before them. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be obstacles, doubt, and setbacks. But for the first time in a long while, Aiden believed that humanity and the Xanteri could find a way to build a future together. A future of cooperation, not conflict. The future of humanity and of the galaxy itself had just taken a new turn. And in that moment, Captain Aiden Cole and Queen Zorkella both knew that the fight for survival wasn't over. It had simply evolved into something greater.